everyone, my name is Vina, aka Miss WOC Reader, and welcome back to my channel. And today I just wanted to talk about a discourse that I saw recently on Twitter that if you're not on Twitter, you might have heard a little bit about from Jess. She recently did a community about it, but she said she wasn't really clear on like all the details, so I just wanted to give my opinion as somebody who's been noticing and has talked about this before and who was taking part in the discussion that was happening. So it all stemmed from a tweet that was actually a tweet from June. So Melissa Taylor, she is a former teacher and a parent, and she is a literacy trainer. So she had tweeted, "Why are so many middle grade books over 400 pages? Can we have more 200-page books, please?" And that tweet got so many views, and it actually ended up being featured in Publishers Weekly. So there was an interesting article in Publishers Weekly. I will link it in the description box below so you can read it yourself, but I do want to read you part of it so you can kind of get a little bit more background. So the article is titled, "It's Not Me, It's You, an Argument for Shorter Middle Grade Books." In the past 2 months, publishers have sent me 41 middle grade books to review for my 16-year-old website, Imagination Soup. It's a place where parents, teachers, librarians, and grandparents can go to find thousands of children's books, recommendations, and reviews, 99.9% of which I've written. Usually, I love all the books, and I'm a fast reader, but when I look at the books on my shelves and my apps, I notice that in the past few months, I've finished 17, abandoned 19, and have yet to read 5. This gives me pause. Even more interesting is the fact that most of the recent books I've abandoned are around 350 to 400 pages. In a moment of frustration, I took a photo of one of my nearby book stacks and tweeted, "Because what about the kids? What about our darling, growing, complicated children who aren't reading as much as we would like? I mean, are they ever? But still, we strive." I'm also wondering if this is what an existential crisis feels like. Am I washed up? Am I suddenly a book reviewer who doesn't like books? When did I start abandoning books? What is happening? And then she kind of goes into like how many comments and stuff she was getting on Twitter. And I found it very interesting that it linked to a different article, which I will also link below, from Publishers Weekly, which was done around June 16th. It's titled "The Shifting Middle Grade Market," and it was talking about how sales are actually down in middle grade. So it says 2022 ended with year-over-year middle grade sales down 16% overall and 19% in hardcover. This year has seen overall middle grade sales down 8% year-over-year, while hardcover sales in the category are down 7% for a total of 18.8 million decline. And it kind of echoed what librarians and educators and parents were chiming in about on Twitter during the discussion. This article actually featured a representative from Barnes & Noble, because as we know, Barnes & Noble got a lot of backlash last year because they decided not to stock all the new hardcover releases that they were stocking before in Lit. And so the representative from Barnes & Noble, Sharon DeVito, chimed in, and she said a few authors were aggrieved that their books were not stocked, mostly by deliberate choice, and characterized this to be due to a policy against hardcovers in general. She notes, in fact, we now simply try to buy hardcovers in the quantity we judge likely to be bought by our customers. And then there was also some quote from James Daunt, who is the CEO of Barnes & Noble, and as we know, last year, people were enraged by his comments. So he said, at the lower price point and in a format friendlier to children themselves, some titles that will struggle to sell in more than very small quantities in hardcover will be better served if published in paperback. It is not all one thing or all the other, but a common sense judgment to be made by the publisher. So I just think about all the different discussions that we've been having about children's lit in the past couple of years, and I've spoken about it before, but I did like a whole video on YA needing shorter books, but middle grade has gotten longer and longer, and it's gotten more adult centered, which some of my mutuals on Twitter were pointing out, who are teachers. I've had some great discussions about this with people recently. So I've been trying to get my niece to read. She's 10. She is not interested in middle grade. People are always telling me, oh, pick up this book for her, pick up that book for her. You know, if that's not working for her, pick up Amari and the Night Brothers. Listen, I loved Amari and the Night Brothers when I read it. I think it's a great series, but it has adult appeal, which is why so many adults have been reading it, enjoying it, and flocking to it. It's already very thick. It is very long for a middle grade, and some of the vocabulary in there is a little bit up from where a lot of kids are currently now. So I'm gonna have to center the US for a moment because publishing is based in the US. These books are mostly targeting a US audience. Because of the pandemic, especially, kids are so far behind. We are in a literary crisis right now, and I just don't think people are fully comprehending that. Like, a lot of kids don't have that parent working with them to help them catch up. Sometimes it's because the parents just are too busy working that they can't spend that extra time needed to spend with them. And you know, the kids also have extracurricular activities they need to go to. I would love to see my niece become like more of a reader again, because she was a great reader as a kid, like when she was younger. But for her, she will read a picture book perfectly fine. I will bring a picture book for her little sister like at least once a month. She'll be the first one picking it up and reading it. Because I always will put it on the table and I'll see, like, we'll be in the back and I'll see it move. And she got excited last month. Like, the library was at a Juneteenth event and they were giving out free comic books. So I brought it for her and she was super excited, like showing it to her parents and stuff. She likes reading like the comic type stuff. She struggles when you get to the long chapters. We were reading a chapter book, and it did have a long prologue and before we got to chapter 1. So she's reading, and she's like, she stopped and she saw chapter 1 like on the next page, and she's like flipping back through it like, no, that can't be right. And I kind of had to make a deal with her. Like, she read a couple chapters and then I read a couple chapters just to encourage her, especially because she has her smartphone. She's on her phone all the time gaming and talking to her friends, and she's into makeup now and starting to get into skincare and all that fun stuff. Reading is not a priority for her, and so I've been trying to find chapter books that aren't too like babyish, because again, she is 10, and sometimes some of the chapter books do lean a little more like childish for the younger reader, because they figure that's the level they should be on, and things that'll hold her attention and really excite her. I just found myself agreeing so much with the educators and librarians who were talking about children don't always have the attention span for long books. Even back in the day when I was a kid, we had books that were getting up there a little bit, like Harry Potter. I feel like Harry Potter really kicked it off as those books got longer and longer. But we also had a lot of short books that were easier to read and consume. So I actually have a couple of the books that I read like when I was middle grade and YA age here. Which I had talked to Oniza about before, was The Spiderwick Chronicles. So I have one of the books here. This was book 3. I had gotten this one randomly at one of those used book sales. And this one is actually only 108 pages. So it's fairly short. It's in a hardcover format, but it's a small hardcover, so it's easy to just throw in your bag and it's not going to take up too much space, which size is also important. Like, the kids aren't trying to carry these big heavy book bags and be walking around with a hefty tome. So I wish we would bring back more mass market paperbacks for the younger audience. I know like the UK does it a little bit, where you could they can just throw a book in their bag, especially if they are going to put them at a different price point. This one was a little bit high. It's like $9.95. I definitely didn't buy it for $9.95. But this was also a fairly popular series. I can't tell you anything about what these books are about now. And the only thing I remember from this one was like the one brother being dragged off by like these gremlin creature type things. But I know I was eating this series up as a child, and because part of it was just because it was just so quick to consume. I saw people making the argument on Twitter that we are lowering children's attention span if we give them shorter books. And I'm like, their attention span is already bad. Forcing them to read 400 or 500 page books is not going to magically make their attention span better. Instead, it's just going to make them hate reading. I, as a child, was not reading 400 or 500 page books. Like Harry Potter, one of the reasons why I never read that series was because it intimidated me. Even though I was at the library every month, constantly getting books, constantly reading, borrowing from my school library, I had no interest in reading hefty page counts. I liked my quick, easy to consume books, and that continued on like even as I got older. Like towards the end of middle school into high school, I read a lot of contemporary romance, and a lot of them too were like quick and easy to read mass market paperbacks. I have one here. This was from Avon Books actually, but they were for teens. A lot of the characters I remember were like 18, just graduated, finally getting to do stuff on their own without like strict parental supervision. And this one is actually 314 pages. So it's not like the 400 like page romances you're seeing now. It's not overly lengthy. It's like getting up there but not too bad. Because I do think romance has gotten a little bit lengthy, and a lot of times it loses the plot towards the middle. Like you're already worn down because you've read so many pages that by the end you just don't care anymore about the couple getting together. Because when you think about it, you already know how a romance is going to end. It's going to have the two characters getting together. So it's really like the journey along the way that keeps your attention and keeps you hooked. And then I have another one here. This is not the original format. I bought this print on demand from Amazon like a couple years ago because of nostalgia. When I originally read it, I read it through my library as a teen, and it was also mass market paperback, but it's a part of the Simon Romantic Comedies line, which were a bunch of easy to read romances that were just fun for teens, and they all had these cute illustrated covers, and They all had girls of different backgrounds. This was the only black main character in it, and it's written by Debbie Rigo, who had been writing for a very long time, and she still writes YA to this day. And this one is I'm skipping past, like, they have like the previews of the next book they were trying to sell. This one was 281 pages. So again, a good length, a reasonable length. A lot of people believe that a book needs to be 400 or 500 pages to tell a good story, and when you look at the books of the past, that's just not the case. We had so many easy to read stories, shorter length, but they still packed a punch and made an impact. And I think we really need to cater to today's audience. While publishing is looking at the being able to raise the prices and get the most money per book, they need to consider that a lot of people who are buying books are not doing it anymore if they're going to still be a high price and they can't get the kids to read them. The librarians and teachers were seeing their frustration about and telling you, we're not buying these books anymore because our kids aren't reading them. And as we see, sales are down. Sales are down in middle grade, sales are down in YA. I've been talking to people about that for a while this year. I don't have the figures YA, but I know it is currently down right now, and it's very dependent on the adult audience. And I hate to see that middle grade is getting there as well, where I'm seeing authors market their books directly to adults, and I see a lot of adults talking about, well, I'm no longer reading YA because I'm just not enjoying those stories, so I've been really leaning into middle grade. And it's not even just middle grade fantasy, it's middle grade contemporary that's long too, and really being written more for that older age group. And I'm like, there's nothing wrong with reading across the board, but you also need to remember that you are not the intended audience. It shouldn't be catered towards you and your needs. It should be catered towards what the kids like. And some of the books that the adult reader gravitates to are not the types of stories that the child reader gravitates to. And sometimes we have different ideas in our head of what we think the kids should be reading versus what they want to actually be reading. You know how many times I've read a YA book that actually felt like it was written for the teens, and then I went on Goodreads to leave my review, and there were people reviewing the book and they were talking about the teens just felt so young and immature here. It felt more like middle grade. And I'm like, no, it didn't feel like middle grade. It very much felt like a teen-centric book. I understand, like, you might not like that, but again, you're not really the intended audience for that book. And I think people get confused because so much of YA currently is written for that adult audience. So that when they come across a book actually written for teens, they're like, oh, I can't relate. Oh, this doesn't feel right. Oh, this isn't mature enough. And also, like, I've come across a lot of books in YA where they do kind of over-explain stuff too much, like coming from the point as where they think children need to have stuff reiterated to them over and over and over again to get the lesson. And that doesn't really vibe with the teen readers either. But like adults will be reading that and be like, yes, they need this lesson. And I'm like, you can do the lesson in a more subtle way. And I've listened to author friends vent that frustration about having to repeat themselves over and over again to drive home the point in a story. One of the recent middle grade series that I think is really doing it well is the Honest June series. So it's great because it's just under 300 pages. This one actually is 271. And it has illustrations in between and like on various pages which we're seeing that a lot of readers are gravitating towards things like graphic novels because they like having those illustrations and they like the shorter word counts and stuff. So I like that this had a shorter word count. It had very snappy and fun writing that was like really relatable and felt like something like those children would actually say, and it had jokes, and it didn't feel like the vocabulary was too expansive for them. And then I got this book recently in the mail for review from Simon & Schuster. It's called The Finch House. It is by Sierra Birch. It comes out in September, so I will be reading it soon. And I was super excited when I opened this, first of all, because look, it's thin. The ARC is 193 pages, which means that the hardcover edition will only be like 200 something, which is really good because it means it's going to be a quicker read. The only downside is I wish they were releasing this in paperback at the same time as hardcover, because the hardcover, while less lengthy, still has that problem where it's $17.99. And so a lot of people, when they see a thinner book for a higher price point, also decide they're not going to pay that amount because they feel they're not getting their money's worth. So I wish publishing would offer more books with different word and page counts at different price points. They keep saying that we're doing these longer books because people prefer longer books. Yeah, people prefer longer books because you are training them to prefer longer books by only publishing longer books. And when we get shorter books, they're still the same price, so then people feel like they're not getting their money's worth, or they feel like the story is incomplete. I feel like one of the go-tos now when people don't like a book is to say, this book needed to be longer. And the book will be like 500 pages. No, the book didn't need to be longer. It needed to be better written. Length does not equal good writing. So many books have hundreds of pages that could easily be cut out or condensed. And those pages are just there because they need to hit a certain word count as required by the publisher. So let me know what your thoughts are about this issue with the length of middle grade and YA books. And if you like this video, make sure and hit that like button. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye!